Let me explain something to you, for those of you who don't know. Coming up with a different meditation talk every week is tough. That's why almost every single week I talk about the thing that is the challenge of the week or the question of the week. Because even when I do that, I feel like all the talks are about the same thing. It's all some version of, being mindful, being in the moment, not being attached, trying to transcend the ego. And I don't really have a big problem with that because that's what it's all about. I mean, that's what our practice is about, right? And we got to have some kind of like a flavor of different things. So this is going to be on some level an interesting talk, and on some level maybe boring. We'll see how I do with it. But I was thinking about the question of the week. The question of the week in the dojo, the challenge of the week is to spend 10 minutes or more each day in silence. And as I've been just continuing to add on more and more disclaimers to this, or addendums to it. So silence does not mean that you are silent, but your surroundings can still be noisy. So it does not count if you're sitting and watching TV in silence. I guess it would be weird if you were sitting there talking at the TV, but it still doesn't count if you're sitting there in silence watching TV or listening to music or bombarding yourself with sensory input. Part of the point is to be in silence, your environment is in silence, and then you are in silence. So you can't be in your room with no noise going on except you're talking on the phone. That's also not being in silence. So it's silence from both ends. And further addendums to this challenge are, it cannot be something that you already do every day. Some people have been asking me about, like a kid asked me, well, what if I'm sitting and reading in silence? And what I said was, if you don't normally sit in silence and read for 10 minutes a day, and that's a challenge for you, sure, then that counts. But if you sit every day and read for 10 minutes, basically what you're doing is you're looking for an excuse not to do the challenge, but not to feel terrible about yourself for not doing the challenge. And so I was talking about this earlier in class today, I think Tai Chi. There are two ways that people approach the challenge. The first way is they hear the challenge and they say, all right, I'm going to take this on. I'm going to do the challenge of the week this week. That sounds like a great way for me to grow and push myself as a martial artist and a human being. The other way is people say, oh, a challenge. I don't want to do that. But if it's something that I'm already doing, I'll take credit for it. Like if I'm already sitting for meditation every day for 10 minutes, sure, I did the challenge of the week, right? No, you have to do something that is additionally challenging to yourself. So that's all background on this. So when I thought about what am I going to talk about with the challenge of the week, because the challenge of the week is to sit in silence, and if I'm sitting here talking, that kind of is going against the whole idea, right? But when I think of silence, first of all, there's the peace, there is the calm that your mind gets to, and you will be pleasantly surprised if you haven't done this before, or you haven't done it a lot. If you sit in silence, or just walk and be in silence. You can even be practicing Tai Chi in movement, but in silence. Your mind is going to start to get calm and peaceful. You will have fewer thoughts, and your mind will be less busy. So it's the same idea as when you sit still and meditate, where we use the metaphor of scooping up pond water and sitting it on the table in a glass, and you see all this stuff swimming around, but you let it sit there long enough and all that stuff falls to the bottom, and then you've got this crystal clear glass of water. Being in stillness is very beneficial and can aid in your meditation and can aid in your silence in helping your mind to become quiet. And simply being in silence, even if you are moving, can be very helpful for this. And the book that comes to mind for me when I think about this very kind of solid stillness that transcends. It's not just like, okay, I'm quiet for a few minutes. Okay, whoop-de-doo. It's like something that changes us, something that transforms us as our practice should be doing. The first book that comes to mind is the Tao Te Ching. And I've done a series of talks about different books where I'll do like a reading and then I'll talk a little bit about it and give my perspective on it. I've not done the Tao Te Ching, quite honestly, because half of what's in here, I don't know what's going on. I can tell you what my interpretation of it is, but it's a very it's a very esoteric kind of like up in the air type of book. It's meant to be not very easily understood on some levels at least. So we're going to do our best with it. And this version of it that we have in the dojo is an especially beautiful version. It's got all these photographs in it, which I'll show you what I'm looking at before then I read it for you guys. So as I talk through this, it'll be interesting because I will be talking, and that will not be silence, but we'll try to get at the experience of silence, maybe on like an emotional level, even if we're not getting it on an auditory level. So this is the first pages, the first set of pictures, and this is chapter 1. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. The named is the mother of 10,000 things. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one can see the manifestations. These two spring from the same source, but differ in name. This appears as darkness, darkness within darkness, the gate to all mystery. So, I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what Lao Tzu was talking about with each little piece of this, but I'll give you something that at least impacts me in a way that I believe that it is related to our practice and our philosophy. So the very first line in this book is, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao, which essentially means that all of these words are pointless. They're pointing to something, but they are not the thing, and you cannot describe it with words. So really what I should do is just close the book and say, sit comfortably, because there's nothing else to say about any of this. In fact, everything that I say, when we communicate about things, on some level, what this is doing is kind of like dancing around it or pointing to it, but it is not the same thing as experiencing it. When you talk about something or you read about something, I think like one of the closest things or one of the closest ways that you will get to the experience of something by reading is like through poetry. And this is kind of close to poetry. I would say that it's poetry in some way. Because that is not just describing, oftentimes poetry is giving you an emotional experience, or at least describing the emotional experience of the thing. So that is really what we're attempting to do through life, is not just to have a logical understanding. We're not supposed to just intellectualize all of this. We're supposed to feel it. We're supposed to be in the present and in the moment. Logic gets in the way of that. The ego is always trying to figure things out and say, well, I think this, and this is how this works, and all that stuff. Well, that's all the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. All of that is just like fluff. It's pointing at the moon, but it's the finger, it's not the actual moon. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. It's the same thing. The nameless, or I'll say it's the same thing. In my mind, it's pointing at the same basic idea. The nameless is the beginning of heaven and earth. So the nameless, that is what is beyond naming or beyond talking about. And heaven and earth, you can read that as being all of creation or the entirety of the universe. Begins with the nameless, begins with nothingness. And from that, we might be able to at least conceptualize or maybe get a feeling for what all of this is. So later on it says, this appears as darkness, darkness within darkness, the gate to all mystery. When we meditate, this is part of what we're trying to get at. We're trying to walk through that gate to all mystery, the darkness behind closed eyes. When we sit in stillness and in silence, we are able to transcend our ego, transcend the small self, or at least we're trying to, and experience that oneness. And that is that darkness within darkness and the gate to all mystery, that stuff that we can't really intellectualize or understand with our logical mind, right? It says, the named is the mother of 10,000 things. So as soon as you name something, this is my interpretation, you've essentially gotten into this world of all of these distractions. And this is like the idea of Maya, where all of this is distracting us from reality. The 10,000 things are like all of the things that stop us from being able to be totally in the present and in touch with ourselves and in touch with that which is beyond ourselves. All of those distractions come from the naming and the thought and the logic and all of that. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. Ever desiring, one can see the manifestations. So he's starting to get into this idea of yin and yang, of opposites, of the paradox of creation, which you cannot have up without down, black without white, all of that. We'll get more into that later on. But he's pointing to when you are desireless, you can see the mystery. So without desire, we can sit and we can experience, or we can be in the moment and experience the mystery. When we are desiring, we are essentially attached to something, some desire that we have, which takes us away from the mystery, which takes us away from all of the possibility, and brings us into that state of mind where we're kind of stuck on something. We're unable to flow. Think of the mystery as like this fluid state. It's like it's the ether. It's like I think of it as like a spirit, or the way that we want to be. If we were to have a physical manifestation of our meditation, it's almost like fog moving through outer space, where there's something there. It's like there's kind of a form there, but it is also formless. And it's not attached to anything. It's fluid. It's flowing. And this is what we want to be like. The next picture is super beautiful. This feather and the kanji next to it, and then this tree. I feel like I'm reading a book to a child. This is a tree. What do we call this? So 2 is, under heaven all can see beauty as beauty only because there is ugliness. All can know good as good only because there is evil. Therefore, having and not having arise together. Difficult and easy complement each other. Long and short contrast each other. High and low rest upon each other. Voice and sound harmonize each other. Front and back follow each other. Therefore, the wise go about doing nothing, teaching no talking. The 10,000 things rise and fall without cease, creating yet not possessing, working yet not taking credit. Work is done, then forgotten. Therefore it lasts forever. So this kind of gets us to some kind of a feeling of this pretty stark and very basic concept of yin and yang, opposites. You cannot have light without shadow. If you're trying to take a picture, some of my students are in a photography class right now. If you're trying to take a picture and there's only light, I'll tell you this. I took a photography class when I was in college, and I think I was kind of good at it, more naturally good at that than I ever was at most other things. And still, it was hard as hell. I didn't know what I was doing most of the time. And when you go to this was before digital photography I think it was just like starting to be a thing, but my phone did not take pictures. I had a black and white camera, and I took the film into a black room and I developed it, and then I, put the negatives on a projecting thing that projects the film onto a piece of paper, and you end up with a picture that looks like this. If you leave it exposed for too long, you don't see this feather or this writing. All you see is black, right? If you don't leave it exposed for long enough, this is on the photo paper, not on the negatives, then you end up with just white. There's no light at all on it, right? And vice versa. It's actually kind of an interesting way to look at it. So that's when you're exposing the photo paper through the negative. When you're doing the negative itself, I think it's actually possible to end up with it's been a very long time, so I might be totally wrong. You might end up with a blown out negative where it's too dark or it's too light. And these are both the manifestation of the interplay between opposites and the fact that you cannot have one without the other. So a picture without light is just a black square. A picture without dark is just a white square. And okay, what about color, seafood, whatever? I'm talking about this. So if you are trying to see something, you cannot perceive it without both. Now, this gets into a whole other issue of like, well, what if I'm not trying to perceive anything? And all I want to have is this experience of what is beyond, opposites, of what is beyond our judgment. Because what happens is we look at something and we say, well, this is good, this is bad, right? This is good, this is evil. We say, this is black, this is white, all of that. That is on some level a function of the mind that if we can experience beyond that, what you do end up with is nothing that is light or shadow, right? It's just kind of like this homogeneous everythingness and nothingness. And that is what is beyond the state of duality that we're in. We're in duality. We are experiencing these different manifestations, as he says, and that is just the way that our mind interacts with the universe and the world and our life. So that is one way of looking at enlightenment, is when we actually get beyond that and we're no longer perceiving light and dark, we just perceive everything. So I just basically went through all of this, didn't I? The wise, we'll skip down to the bottom. The wise go about doing nothing, teaching no talking. That's like when I'm pretending to be wise and I talk about how actually everything that I say is pointless and you should just ignore it. But honestly, like somebody asked me a great question in Tai Chi yesterday, and a couple of times this week. And very oftentimes I like to revert to this. This is completely honestly and truthfully the way that I look at our practice on a bigger scale. The more I talk about it, and the more we try to put things into words and language, the further away we get from the truth, as I was saying before, and the more stuff you have in your head, right? So real wisdom is silence. Real wisdom is not boastful. It's not trying to tell everybody what you know. And part of that is because in words are fluff. Words are meaningless. Words are trying to point to the truth. So if you're trying to get better at meditation and you're trying to get there by talking about it or thinking about it, you're trying to logic your way through meditation, you can't get it because that is all just noise in your head. It gets in the way. The 10,000 things rise and fall without cease. So when the wise is going about doing nothing and teaching no talking, these 10,000 things are still going to come and go. The distractions and the manifestations of life and light and dark and all of this stuff come and go. And the wise is unchanged or unperturbed by it. Creating yet not possessing, working yet not taking credit. So this is a very Taoist way of looking at leadership and just what it is to be like a higher level or a more enlightened, fully manifested person. Is you're working, but you're not taking credit for it. You're not interested in getting the accolades. You're not interested in everybody else thinking that you're amazing, because that's a function of the ego and it gets in the way of the work. This is like the idea of striving without striving. When we work very hard only because we need to get the fruits of our labor, or worse, because we need to get the recognition from everybody else, that totally taints the work and in fact gets in the way of it. We can only be our purest self and accomplish the most amazing pure things when we're uninterested by fame and fortune and even the fruits of the labor, the progress, or the end result. None of that needs to come into it. We can just be in the moment and focus on the work itself. It says, work is done, then forgotten. Therefore it lasts forever. All right. So this one is a struggle for me. This is 3. So I believe we've got like a stream here and then a beautiful forest landscape. And he says, not exalting the gifted prevents quarreling. Not collecting treasures prevents stealing. Not seeing desirable things prevents confusion of the heart. The wise therefore rule by emptying hearts and stuffing bellies, by weakening ambitions and strengthening bones. If people lack knowledge and desire, then it is best not to interfere. If nothing is done, then all will be well. So depending on your interpretation and the way that you're looking at this is some like real Machiavellian, like shady leadership, like people are trying to keep the masses dumb and in their place. And there's probably some of that here. But I'll try to take a different spin with it. So not exalting the gifted prevents quarreling. This whole chapter really is about kind of like government and leadership. And it can be something that we can take into our own lives, of course, otherwise I wouldn't be reading it. So this doesn't have to be, you are in the government. This can just be at home with your kids, or, you're teaching, or you're just, around a group of people that maybe really care about what you say. If you're exalting certain people, then everyone starts to kind of, start to quarrel. People are always fighting to get that attention and fighting to seem like they're better than. So if you just start from the beginning by not exalting the gifted, that prevents that. Not collecting treasures prevents stealing, of course. Well, if you got nothing to steal, no one's going to steal it from you. Not seeing desirable things prevents confusion of the heart. So on some level, it's kind of like, you could imagine it like I'm just pretending that these things don't exist, and I can therefore be desireless if I never have them put in front of me. This is more, I think, in the realm of, or in the direction of, if you don't collect treasures for other people, if you're not putting desirable things in front of other people, then it's going to prevent them from being confused. It's going to prevent them from having those attachments and those desires, which you can see would lead to maybe a more peaceful society. And if you're doing this, like, say, with your kids, well, if you get a cookie jar and you sit it up there and the kids just stare at it, I mean, most kids are going to want that cookie. And they're, sitting there trying to do their homework, but all they can think about is that cookie. So if you just hide the cookies, then there's nothing to worry about. Sometimes we might have to do that. I think I tend to fall more on the side of expecting people to be able to handle the challenges, and we want to be able to expect ourselves to handle the challenges of life, and therefore just hiding from desire and pretending that it's not there doesn't necessarily always give us the fullest experience of life. We want to try to be able to meet that challenge and then deal with it. I know you guys on Zoom just lost me for a second, but I'm going to move on anyways. So the wise therefore rule by emptying hearts and stuffing bellies. An empty heart, ooh, it's rough. It's funny because our wall scroll in the dojo says Mushin, and the direct translation to that could be empty heart or no heart. And some people who speak Chinese, they look at that and they say, why would you want that in your school? No heart. That's like the connotation in martial arts and in Zen and in meditation is more of like mindfulness. We're so focused and in the moment, and our mind is so present that there is no distraction. So this is no mind, no little mind, only big mind. I'm not sure that that's what he's saying here. The wise rule by emptying hearts and stuffing bellies. Well, if everyone is fed, that at least makes people a little bit more happy, right? So that can take care of a lot of problems. Emptying hearts, it's kind of like the same idea as not exalting the gifted, right? If people are really interested in trying to stack themselves up against each other, or they're very ambitious, it says by weakening ambitions and strengthening bones. This is on some level, sure, it's about allowing people, or maybe creating the experience, and possibly within yourself, where you're not focused on those distractions of ambition. You're more just focused on the bones of your being in the present, and the simple kind of way of experiencing life. That's what the bones are. If people lack knowledge and desire, then it is best not to interfere. I feel like there are a lot of people in the world right now that are lacking in knowledge, and probably not so much with desire. There's a lot of desire out there. But I think that education is incredibly important, and we might enter a situation where we see like, oh, this person doesn't know anything, let me educate them. And oftentimes that just gets in the way. We're inserting ourselves from an ego level, from a trying to show everybody how important and knowledgeable we are. That doesn't usually work. So in that case, maybe it's best not to interfere. If nothing is done, then all will be well. This is like the Taoist attitude towards a lot of things. If you basically do nothing, then things will work out by themselves. Taoists are very much in tune with nature, and it is all about kind of the natural processes of things. So, there's the sun and the moon, and the sun is going to rise and fall, and the moon is going to come up and go down, and this is the natural way of things. If we try to change things, we may or may not end up changing things, but we will almost certainly end up mucking things up to some degree or another. So very often, the best thing to do is no thing. Just let it ride, let it flow, and be okay with not inserting yourself and interfering with the natural state of things, because all will be well. So 4, some more beautiful pictures. We've got a water lily. The Tao is an empty vessel. It is used but never filled. O unfathomable source of 10,000 things, blunt the sharpness, untangle the knot, soften the glare, merge with dust. O hidden deep but ever present, I do not know from whence it comes. It is the forefather of the ancestors. And I like this one so much that I'm just going to read it again and say nothing about it, because I don't even know what I would say about this. I think this does a pretty good job of getting us to experience, feel something like this, and possibly just confuse us out of a state of logic and send us right into a place where we can be ready for meditation, which is the same point of a koan in Zen. So I'll read it one more time. The Tao is an empty vessel. It is used but never filled. O unfathomable source of 10,000 things, blunt the sharpness, untangle the knot, soften the glare, merge with dust. O hidden deep but ever present, I do not know from whence it comes. It is the forefather of the ancestors. That's beautiful. So, as we sit to meditate tonight, our mind is going to recognize, light and shadow. It's going to recognize thought and no thought, breathing in, breathing out, and allow your mind to settle rather than having to insert yourself and get in the way of it. Just allow it to be. And in this, we might get to a place that is beyond that duality and beyond this characterization, judgment, and just be there. There we will find silence. There we will find stillness of the mind. And I think it should be easy for you not to remember what I just read because it's confusing. So if you start to think about it, just remember all of that is pointless because all of it is words, and the Tao, the eternal Tao, cannot be named. Anything that we put words to is on some level meaningless, so let it go. Sit.